All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started with a lecture slash code along with this MERN stack where I'm just going to make up a project idea and build it. And so, you know, there's a lot of ideas out there that you could build. You know, there's an app idea. Ideas are not hard to come by. It's easy to come up with an idea. It's hard to actually implement it. Let's go to, I'm going to start off by GitHub. You do not have to do this, okay? You don't have to create a repository. In fact, you know, you can clone mine. I'm going to make mine public. So if you want to just reference my code at any point, you can. If you want to do this, that's fine too. If you want to create your own repository, suffice to say, I want to make this public and available to you guys. So if you don't code along or if you fall behind, you will have access to all of my code through this public repository. So I'm going to make a new repository, and I've got a few owners, a few different accounts kind of thing. You probably don't have this drop-down list. I'm not going to select a template. And my repository name, so what is this project? This is going to be, by the way, again, just repeating myself, this is going to prepare you for the lab, 01, 02, and this is going to prepare you for the hands-on test. Okay, so it's important to kind of follow along and pay attention. What I want to create is an app that's kind of a marketplace. You're familiar with marketplaces. Any dating app is a marketplace. You're just trying to connect people together. Uber is a marketplace, right? You're people who want rides and drivers. What else am I forgetting? Airbnb is a marketplace. What other marketplaces are there? DoorDash. All those delivery apps. Anything else? Any other big ones? Amazon. Grubhub. Yeah, I guess the idea is we're just trying to connect people. And so Facebook Marketplace, I guess in a way Amazon.com has sellers and buyers. So in its own way, it's at that kind of marketplace. So I'm going to make a marketplace for people with dogs. There's a lot of people with dogs. And there's people who want their dogs exercised because, let's face it, that's healthy for the dog. But they don't want to exercise them dogs themselves. Maybe they would pay someone to walk their dog or to jog with their dog. So that's kind of the idea. I'm just going to make a simple marketplace between dog owners on one side and people who want to walk, to get paid to walk someone else's dog or to jog with someone's dog. I think there's probably this service exists out there somewhere. I'm just going to guess Pets.com probably has a service like this. But that's okay that it exists, right? Just because there's competition in the space does not mean, Kyle, right? Right on. Just because there's competition in a space doesn't mean, and maybe, Pets.com takes me to PetSmart. So
Rover.com is one.
What is it?
Rover,
that's what I was thinking. Rover.com. But Rover.com probably does other things as well, right? House sitting, doggy daycare, all these things, right? So there might be a space where all you're doing is dog walking, right? So just because there's competition, just because an app has been built before doesn't mean it's a bad idea. We're going to specialize in the dog walking section here. Now, maybe this is reason enough not to go forward with this because there's already a successful company. Again, that's like the business use case. You got to figure out if it's a good business idea or not. But that's, this is a toy application. We're not really trying to compete with Rover. However, if we start making money, who knows? So, we'll call this the dog walking app. Now, that's not a very creative name. Let's use ChatGPT. So this is not the important part. I want to create an app that offers a marketplace for dog walking or running. Can you give me 5 creative name ideas, okay? And we're going to crowdsource this from the class. You guys get to pick the best name idea, and we're going to go with it. Here are 5 creative names: Paw Pace, Stride and Wag, Fur Trek, Tail Runner, Paws on the Go. Raise your hand for Paw Pace. Raise your hand for Stride and Wag. We got 1 vote so far. Raise your name for Fur Trek. Fur Trek's in the lead with 3 votes. Raise your hand for Trail Runner. All right, we got Paws on the Go. I think Tail Runner wins. All right, so there we go.
Can we get a revote of that?
Huh? We're gonna live with this? Is that what you said? Okay.
A revote.
We get a revote.
Revote.
I don't know if people have time to read it if they're picking that.
Tail Runner is the name of my app. Okay, now, when I've taught this in the past, so here's something that's really interesting. I've taught this in the past, and adding a node getIgnore. First off, what is a getIgnore?
It makes certain files not get tracked.
Bingo. Make certain files not get tracked. So what that means is you can have files on your local repository, but those files will not get pushed onto github.com. Okay, so getIgnore is a file that says, hey, ignore these files on my local repo and don't put them onto github.com. Okay, so when I've taught this class in the past, there's a template for Node. And that's going to put a whole bunch of file types and extensions that are, common to ignore in a Node application. Okay, I'm not going to select that though, because I've actually seen this. I've seen this cause a conflict. So my getIgnore is going to be none when I go to deploy. I've actually seen the way we deploy, this has caused some errors when I select that template in the past. So I'm not going to select that, and we're going to manually create my getIgnore, and you guys can follow along with this instead of selecting the template. And for the license, again, MIT is what I default to. You can kind of read MIT, open source, free to use. Don't, you can use my code as you see fit. Okay, so here's Tail Runner, and now what I need to do is clone it. Okay, so this is the URL to the .git for my repository. Now you guys use GitHub Desktop, which is fine. I like TortoiseGit. TortoiseGit, if you installed TortoiseGit because you followed the setting up your environment document, you should be able to right click on your desktop, and you now have these options that were not here before, and one of them is to use a clone. Okay, you could also use the command line interface, which is pretty simple to do a clone with command line. But what this is going to do is use this URL on the internet and clone it to this directory on my local computer. So it's real simple to say OK. And what do we have here is essentially an empty folder with a hidden Git folder. Okay, this is how you know on your local repository that you are working with a remote repository. This hidden Git folder tells you that this is a repository working with Git or GitHub or another remote. Okay, and so if you don't have, this is a hidden folder. You can kind of tell because it's a little shaded out, but you might not be able to see your hidden folders. You have to change your view, and you have to click Show Hidden Items. So if you don't have this button clicked to show hidden items, you're not going to see the hidden folder that is .git. Again, this is a big flag that this is a repository. Okay, so let's go ahead and open up Tail Runner, right click it, and open it with code. Again, if you're not following with the GitHub, you just need a folder called tailrunner and open that folder with code. And here we are with an empty folder with an MIT license in it. You can read that. And what did we learn yesterday is the first step to kind of get us up and started.
Create an MJS file.
Okay, we could create an MJS file, and that's valid. And that's fine. We could go ahead and create index.mjs, and that could be your first step. But what else could we do at this point?
Your npm initialization.
Yep. Yeah. So if you heard that, if not, I'll repeat it. Initialize with npm, right? Remember, step one was to run a command called npm init. npm init. What does npm init do? What does npm init do? Yeah, creates that package.json file. Okay, remember that from yesterday a little bit now? So how do we run a command? We're going to open up a new terminal, and we're going to run the npm init command. And so now this is a little interactive. What are we doing here? What is our package name? Yes, tailrunner is our package name. This is software version 1.0.0. Remind me the versioning. What does the 1 represent? Major. This 0 represents minor, and then this 0 represents patches. So this is version 1. Major version 1. Okay. Now a description. Again, how about we'll just use ChatGPT. Give me a paragraph description for my app. This is the cheap way to go about it, but I'm just going to not have to use my creative juices this morning on writing a paragraph.
I was waiting on what you were going to put for it, but I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, Paul Pace. Oh, what I'm going to replace with tail runner. And as we're waiting, this is really giving me a whole paragraph. And copy, replace paw pace with tail runner. This is not going the fastest. Come on, there you go. Move it, move it, move it. Hop, hop, chop, chop. Yep.
Just had a question about this real quick. Just wanted to make sure I was using this right.
Yeah.
It says license.
Okay, so again, this is all updatable later. So if any of this is not good, not a good description, I'm not worried about it because you can always update this later. Question, yes.
Does the entry point, does it just always say index data?
That's the default. You can change it.
Default, okay.
Yeah, this is the default. You can always change it. I'm happy making it index.js. Test command, we can update this later. I'm going to leave it empty. Git repository, well, we do have one of those. Let me go back to my Git repo, copy that to the clipboard. Someone needs to mute themselves, please. Let's paste that in. Okay, for keywords, again, this is all updatable later. I'm going to say best dog walking app ever. Author, my name. And class. MIT license. And then Is this okay? If you just hit enter, it will assume yes. I'm going to hit enter, and it created my package.json. Okay, so now that we have this package.json in here, now let's go ahead and create our index.js as our entry point. And notice it's not an MJS. So let's go ahead and create index.js. Liam?
Wait, what do we put in the license?
I just put MIT in the license. Yes?
So with us using index.js, don't we need to add like that module?
Yes. So that's where I was going. So with the idea that we don't have MJS here, what line of code do we need to add in our package.json to work with modules? Paul, you had it. And it's type. So what we're looking at in this package.json, very similar to when we're talking about our objects, right? This is by the way, this is JSON, JavaScript object notation. We're looking at an object as dictated by these curly braces. So this is JSON, and JSON has keys and values, right? Called key value pairs. So the key is the type key, and the value is module. And you put a comma, and this is going to allow us to use that newer module syntax with the imports and the exports, as opposed to the old syntax, which is the keyword of require. And here, okay, that's a good start. All right, well, what was the package that we installed yesterday that we learned all about we learned about NodeMon, but let me ask the question better. To build a web server, what package do we learn to build a web server? Express, right? So how do I learn about Express and how to install Express?
Documentation on the website.
The documentation on the website. So what website am I going to?
Express.js.com.
Okay, so let's go to npm.js or Express. I mean, either way. I'm going to search for Express. So npm.js.com. Search for Express. And here is the install command. Remember, npm is a command line tool that will download dependencies that other developers have built. So if you want to learn more about Express, you go to the full documentation, express.js.com, which that would open up in a new tab. Okay. But it's real safe to just go ahead and install Express. Now, yesterday we installed NodeMon. I just want to point out, we installed that globally yesterday. So if you followed along, this NodeMon should in fact boot up for you. Is this working for you guys? If you type in NodeMon, I see a couple people it's going.
Yeah, it works.
Okay. Okay. So let me come around and help those where it's not working for you. So here's what you want to do. If it's not working for you, we're going to go back to NPM homepage. We're going to search for NodeMon. And I'm going to go to it's right here, npm install -g NodeMon. And copy that and run that at the terminal window. That should get NodeMon installed properly for you. Now, that does work as the first step, but you might remember yesterday, Paul shared his screen and we had to change some PowerShell settings. And so basically, you might end up with an error message if you go to run NodeMon right now. And that error message gives you a URL. You got to follow that URL, copy the script, open up PowerShell, run the little tag.
My node mod.
Oh, I
Did you hear what I just said about following the URL? I'll help you out. Let me get you there. Okay, so we have Express installed. We will install some other dependencies as well, but we'll get started with Express. And so what code do we bring in to start an Express server? Where would you go? Yeah. Maybe under getting started? Now, this is all very relevant right here, besides how we bring it in. So I'm just going to copy lines 2 through line 11 and go back to my index.js, import Express from Express, and then paste the rest of it. And this will get a basic server up and running. And then we're going to run nodemon index.js. And what's working? Cannot find Express. So let's look at package.json. I should have installed Express. Did I install Express?
don't think we did.
We never installed Express. I talked about installing Express, but I never installed Express. Let's go back to npm express, copy npm I express. So this is the command to install Express. Go back to the terminal. Control C to stop. Paste in the command npm I express, or type it out. Yes, sir.
We're going to use Express pretty much the whole semester, right?
Yeah.
Is there a way that we can kind of, you know, how we globally install Pokemon? It's probably not.
Not that I've ever done.
Okay.
Okay. Now Express is installed. You got to install Express before you use Express. That makes sense. And if you now run, you get example app listening on port 3000. How do I view it in the browser then?
You go to the browser and type in the 127.
Localhost colon 3000.
Yeah.
Hello world. So you should be able to get hello world in the browser. So here's a mistake that I've seen 3 or 4 times now already this morning. When you have this file open, very common mistake. I do it all the time. Even when you know what you're doing. You have this file open and then you go to install a dependency. Like what did we do? We installed Express. And now I changed the type of module here, and then I installed Express, which added all of this right here. Okay, so basically what happened was my file was no longer matching, like there were version conflicts. Like my file had a type of module on it, but this file was open, so I was trying to add this, but it couldn't. So if that doesn't make sense, here's the short version. You need to have package.json closed when you're not working on it. That way you're not going to get these version conflicts between the file. And if you ever see a dot, like I'm going to add a semicolon right here, everyone sees this dot, that means this file isn't saved, right? If I hit Control S, that dot will go away. It'll become an X. If you ever see a dot on your package.json, that means package.json isn't saved. If I go to save it and it gives you an error, okay, it's probably this error that I'm talking about right now that there's like some conflicts, I recommend just saving it and not saving, and then just reopening it and then just seeing what you need to change. Okay, so if you ever go to close package JSON, it's like, hey, you got two versions of the same file, just close the one that you're in. And then what I had to do on many computers, I just had to re-add this type of module because the dependencies was there, but the type of module wasn't. Okay. Okay. Now, one thing I like to do, these little backticks is this console log. I like to add an http:// or localhost :port right here. So if I save that, and I kind of rerun my nodemon, clear the screen, rerun nodemon. Now it says example app listening on port localhost 3000. Now I can control click and open it in a browser.
That's very useful.
Yeah, that's nice. So you don't have to type it out all the time.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
that's smart.
Yep. Another thing that I like to do at any stage is there's console log is useful, but there's a better tool for debugging. So I'm going to hit Control C. I'm going to show you guys another package now, and I did not show you this yesterday. Go ahead and go to npm.js .com. Okay, and I want you to search for the debug package. Okay, and there's a few steps to getting this debug package working. But it's basically going to give, and you'll see the benefit of this, our console logs will be color coordinated. So you can get different files, can have different color console logs. So you know where the console log is coming from because of color coordination. It helps, like, everyone can nod their head and they understand, like, hey, in HTML, it helps when tags are color coordinated and attributes are certain colors. Like, color coordination helps you recognize parts of your code, and that's what this debug is. This is color coding our console logs. So think of it as an upgrade to console log. npm idebug is the command.
Should we do global on it?
This is not one that I do globally. Again, that's not to say that it doesn't make sense. It could make sense, but I typically don't. So npm idebug. Again, my package JSON is closed. And let me show you how I can upgrade my console log. Now I need to import debug. So I'm going to say import debug from debug. And once I have line 2, now I get to make essentially like a chat channel. And so I would call this, I'm going to make a variable, const debug index, because this is my index file. So I'm making this variable called debug index. Yes. Yeah, so I'll say that on the recording. If you're in nodemon, so if I run nodemon and your app is running and you want to install a new dependency, you got to break out of nodemon. So you got to hit Control C, and that'll bring you back to the terminal window where you can install. Question? Yes, sir, Paul.
How come it's like when we whatever copy paste the express stuff to the server, how come it comes in with like no semicolons?
They're optional. I mean, semicolons are optional. I like them. A lot of people like them, but they're optional. Okay, let me see. Okay, I think that's what we need to now use this debug. And so I can replace this console log now with my debug index. And now if I run nodemon, let's see what breaks. Yeah, I am missing one step. I thought I was to get my debug. Notice my console log is gone. Yeah, there's okay. You know, we got all these variables here, which are standard JavaScript variables. There's another kind of variable called an environment variable. An environment variable kind of, well, let's talk about the first kind of environment variables. If I search on Windows, there are environment variables on Windows. So these are system-wide across your entire operating systems. These are variables that exist across your entire operating system. Okay? Environment variables exist across your entire application. So environment variables typically are kind of a global scope, if you think of them that way, and a lot of sensitive information goes in environment variables. You put like passwords and what you call secrets and keys, so what we're going to do is we're going to install another package. So let's close this out. And this package is called .env. So debug, to get debug working, okay, I'm going to install .env. And this .env is going to be a package that allows us to work with environment variables. You could see the install command right here. And so let's kind of Control C and install .env. I can kind of open up my package JSON. Now you can see these three dependencies. I've installed Express.env and debug. And so I'm going to create a file to store my variables in. And it's literally .env. There's no file name, there's only a file extension. And this .env file, again, is for environment variables that are for the entire application. And what I need to do here is say, hey, my debug channels, anything starting with the word app, and then the name of the channel stars a wildcard. So you notice kind of back here, this is app::index, that this is a valid channel name. So this debug equals app::star allows us to have this name. And now, if I say nodemon index.js, we need to load our environment variables. So there's one more step to get this loaded. And I'm going to get you guys there. Back on the index.js file. It's a 2-liner. So these 2 lines are for debug. And here's what we need for import star .env .env.config. So this will import our environment variables. All right, it took me a second, but here's the fix. So basically, we're manually running the nodemon command. And like we did yesterday, Let me zoom in a little bit here. You guys see this better now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Is that enough zoom?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So what I want to do is I want to go to my package JSON, and I want to bring in some scripts here to do the run dev, right? So we had the maybe the dev script or the start script, which is the node index.js. Okay, so let's get these quotes right. The start script, and then we'll have the start dev script, which runs nodemon. But we have to basically add a switch here to load our .env variables right here. So this is the magic that was missing. That when we run this script. So let me show if I were to do this nodemon .env config index.js. So that runs it. Let me click save. Let me try. Still not working. Hold on. Now I'm going to start npm run start dev script. Man, I'm getting there, but one more step. Don't forget the -r switch. Sorry, folks. Okay. Let's hit the docs and see, but basically it's going to get that .env to load. So I'm going to close this terminal window. I'm going to run a new terminal window and do npm run start dev. Finally, we get it to say app server. Okay, so the question is, what does the switch R do? And this is on the nodemon command. So the answer to that, and I'm going to be right with you guys because I know there were several steps, but I'm going to go to the docs for nodemon. Hi. What's going on? Okay, so we've got the debug package working as indicated here by this pink app:server. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the steps that I took to get this working, because there were several steps to get this debug package working. The first thing I did was I installed the debug package, and then I quickly found out I also needed to install the .env package for environment variables. Okay, so I installed two packages, and those were kind of the first steps. The next thing I had to do is I needed to create an environment variable file that has this syntax of .env. There's no file name, it's only an extension. And this is the file where we will put our environment variables that are kind of global in scope for the whole application and secure. Like a lot of these are considered like secure variables. Yes?
Real quick, I did just have a question about this. So we're using like the asterisk there. I know in like C and CSS we did the same thing for like everything.
That's what it is.
Same idea.
It's a wild card that represents anything's allowed.
Okay.
So our channels are allowed to start with the word app, and then anything.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool.
Is essentially what that says. So install the packages, create this environment variable file. And here's now 4 lines that I had to put on my index.js. I had to import .env. And by the way, this is another wildcard. So this is like import all of the exports. And as we talk about importing and exporting modules, you'll see that you can export a lot of things. So the stars import all the things as this .env object from the .env package. And then you run this config method. And then let's make the channel. So we say import debug from debug and basically create a channel name. Now I call this app server. I like to name this the same name as my file. So for, in troubleshooting, I just changed the name to server, but I'm going to change this to index. Okay, so I'm going to change this to index, this to index. Okay, and notice on line 17, this used to be a console log. All of this code, okay, takes this console log, which is not color coordinated, and now I can say debug index, and when I save it, now I get this red color that represents that this is a console log coming from my index file. Okay, as these files get more and more and more files, it helps to have this color coding for debugging, which of course debugging is used in troubleshooting. You guys are familiar with debugging. There's one last step. I got this far and it still wasn't working. The one last step that I had to implement here was I had to add in my scripts. So if you guys were on break when I did this, I added 2 scripts on my package JSON. The start script runs the node command, okay, and then the start devs, the start is going to be used for the production, in a production environment. Start dev is while we're in development. Notice start dev runs nodemon minus R. The question is, well, what does minus R do? And I was like, well, it's been a while. Let me look it up. I didn't remember. It requires a module, which is the .env config. It basically imports the .env config before it runs the script, right? So nodemon minus R is going to require our .env file. This basically loads that .env file anytime we run this nodemon command before it runs the index.js. Okay, so if I close, of course we can still run nodemon index.js, but that's not using the script. From now on, we're going to run npm run. That's the command to run a script. And which script are we running? It's start dev, and then that gets it booted up. Okay, so let's get everyone working with their debug channel going. And I see some hands going up, so I'll help one at a time. Okay, we are making progress. We've got this up and running. Okay, yesterday we started making routes, and we had some routes inside of our index.js file. You guys have heard of separation of concerns before. Separation of concerns is you take different purposes, like HTML has a different purpose than CSS, right? HTML is for the structure of your code. CSS is for the styling of your code. And so if you think of index.js, this is your web server. And you're setting up your web server and your web server settings, and routing, in other words, your endpoints, the endpoints that your server serves, is kind of a different purpose than just creating the server and setting up the server. So routing endpoints is a separate concern from setting up a web server. And so what it winds up being is you wind up having a lot of different, you could overload this file with routes. We're we're going to have a lot of routes in our application, a lot of endpoints. And this file would become very lengthy, full of different routes. And so, what were the different methods that we talked about yesterday as far as our HTTP methods? Get, post, put, delete. All of these kinds of operations are what we're going to be coding, but we want to put them in a different file. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a folder structure I'm just going to create in the root here, I'm going to create a routes folder. You kind of see the little icon that's in there. And inside of my routes, I'll make another subfolder. So I'm clicking this routes folder, and I'm going to click another subfolder inside of routes. And I'm just going to call this my API routes. And so you can kind of see it's /routes/API. And I did routes first, and then inside of routes I created API. Right, so if I were to actually look at this on my desktop, here's tail runner. It created a routes folder and then an API folder, and that's it, right? There's the full path.
No, I meant like creating the API.
I don't understand your question. Do you have a question, Henry?
Yeah, you naming it. The name that you use.
Is that a question? I'm sorry, I don't understand. What are you asking?
Can you just go back to the
Sure, sorry. Go back to my code. I just had that folder open. Desktop, tail runner, routes, API. It's an empty folder. There's nothing in it right now.
You made a new folder in the route folder, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then
That's all I've done. But I am going to create a new file inside of here. So I'm going to create a new file. And this is what we're going to do CRUD operations on. And so in this scenario, we've got, essentially we've got dog walkers and we've got dog owners. And so maybe we create like a dog owner.js, dog owner.js. And okay, so what we need to do is link this index file to this dog owner file so that, essentially we can do a bunch of routes. Like if I were to do another route here, this would be like /owners, like we were doing yesterday, and we could get a list of owners. Okay, but we're not going to be putting our routes here because, again, this file would get overloaded. We're going to instead be putting our owners route here. So we need to link these two files together is essentially what we need to do. So this file, we're going to import Express just like we did from Express over there. And we're going to spin up a router. Const router equals express.router. And at the bottom here, we're going to export router as, call it dog owner router. And I'll just make one route here. And so if we were to list, we'll say router.get/list. And so we're just going to respond with our list of dog owners. So I'm going to kind of pause this here, let you guys write that code. Okay, so now we basically have this new route. This route is going to list our dog owners, and we don't really have any dog owners. So right now, it just sends a little string text that says list of dog owners, okay? And what we need to do is we need to get this route associated over here in our index file. So to kind of start this off, up at the top where our imports are, I'm going to import our dog owner router, and let me make sure that this path is correct. From ./routes/API/dog owner, you got to have the .js here. So that was not correct, but it was close. And we're almost there. Okay. This code is going to go under our app.listen. So here we brought in this dog owner router, which is exported from this file right there. We import it over here. And down here we're going to say app.use single quote /API/dog owner, comma, dog owner router. Now let me explain the path that we just created. Right now when we boot up our app, our root, if I go to our root, it says hello world, right? But if I follow this path, now if I go to /API/dog owner, you concatenate this string. Everyone zone in on me here. Everyone watching my screen? Line 23. We're going to do string concatenation. /API/dog owner /list. We're adding this string plus the /list to ultimately hit that full route. So let's concatenate those strings. So it's /API/dog owner /list. And you can see it responds with a list of dog owners. So we have connected our dog owner JS into our index.js, and we're performing a little bit of routing doing this get request. So you should be at this point where you can get list of dog owners in the browser. Okay, so now we've got some of the routing out of our index file, which is good. Separation of concerns. The one thing, and as we start talking about what is an API, a RESTful API, it might make sense, since there are many dog owners, like it's plural, whether this is a singular or plural dog owners, probably makes sense to make our route dog owners list, since there are many dog owners. So just change that to plural, and again we'll dive deeper around best practices for our URLs. But because there are many, it would make sense to me to make that plural. That allows us to come back over here and just do our CRUD operations at our different routes. And so let's maybe have a discussion around what is our array of dog owners. And so what could be said? Do we need to separate it out? First name, yeah, sure. First name John. Last name, sure, Doe. And could you not have an array of dogs? Something like this?
Yeah.
And we'll just have two to kind of get started. And so if we do, if we list our dogs, let's do a status code. I didn't show you guys status code of 200, meaning successful. Res status 200 dot send dog owners. We'll just send that array back. So now if I go to /API dog owners, I made a plural, list, it sends it back to the browser. Now, that's all we're looking for at this point. Obviously, what we're going to do is we're going to learn how to make it pretty using React and a front end. But for right now, all we have is a back end serving up data. So that's cool. Let's do a get a dog by ID. I don't have an ID. So maybe we should generate an ID for our dogs, right? So let's just do back on our dog owners. We'll get dog owner by ID. This will be ID :1, ID :2. These is the ID of our dog owner. ID 1, ID 2. So this gets the full list of dog owners. This gets a, well, we don't want a list /ID. Let's just do /ID. So again, the full route becomes API /dog owners /1 to get the first dog owner or /2. You guys can interpret the code that Copilot wrote for me. This is a find method that belongs to the array, right? You pass it a lambda. You're looking for a dog owner where the dog owner's ID. Remember yesterday we read a parameter variable using rec.params.id? You're getting the string out of the URL and parsing it to an int using that triple equal sign in JavaScript that checks for the value and the data type. So if you do a /1, you're checking the dog owner ID equal to 1. Again, this piece right here reads the variable out of the URL. If the dog owner is not found, if it's a falsy dog owner, then we send back 404. The dog owner with the given ID was not found. Otherwise, right? So this is a one-liner if statement. You don't need curlies. Otherwise, you send back 200.send dog owner. Yesterday we got introduced to Postman. Okay, at this point, you could use Postman to start testing this, or not. So if I go to dog owners list, there's our list. But if I go dog owners 1, now I'm just returning the first dog owner. Dog owners 2, all good. Dog owners 3, the dog owner with the given ID was not found. And any other number up there obviously doesn't work.
That's not working.
All right, so remember these methods. This is a GET method. That's an HTTP GET request. But if we're going to add a new dog owner, what method are we going to use instead? We'll do a post. Router.post. And so if you post to dog owners, and sometimes you'll see it like an add. So this would be, what would this URL be? It would be localhost 3000 / API / dog owners plural / add. And so sometimes you see this add here. I've seen where that's not maybe considered the best practice, but I think it's readable. So for now, we're going to do /add. Okay. Again, it's the request object and the response object. Request is the HTTP request coming from the client. Response goes back to the client. Arrow anonymous JavaScript function, curly braces, because we're going to have multiple lines, curly brace. Okay, so that this is the setting up of the route. Now we're going to wind up using Postman here because, well, we need to accept what is your first name, what is your last name, and who are your dogs. And so in order to accept a post, there is a line of code back on index that we have to write. And I'm going to do this. This is a line of middleware right here. I'm going to say app.use So the user is going to fill out a web page. They're going to fill out a form. And that form data is going to be saved into rec.body because of this line. You're going, what is rec.body? Well, if you go back here, we have rec.params. Rec.params was that URL variable. Remember yesterday we learned that colon right here, this is creating what's called a route variable. So we were reading like the ID of 1. So rec.params ID. Notice what I'm highlighting here on line 15 is also highlighted on 14. Those have to match, right? Rec.params means from the URL. Rec.body means, well, that's coming from the HTML body. That comes from the HTML body. Okay, so now we've got this rec.body that we can use to receive some information. So check this out. So I'm just going to do const dog owner equals rec.body. And how about, and we're going to do something like this where we push the dog owner. But let me console.table dog owner. Okay, So I'm not going to do anything with dog owner. I'm just going to show you in a table, okay, what's being sent across. Let's open up Postman. I'm going to show you how to test this with Postman.
Oh, do we need to like install it?
Yeah, you got to install Postman. I would install it. If you don't have it, we're at a point where let's go ahead and install Postman. And matter of fact, we're at a decent time to take a break. While you take a break, let's install Postman, and I'll show you how to use it. Let's take 10 minutes. Come back at 10:40, and then we'll start using Postman on the way back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate doing a post, calling this route, and I'm going to do this with Postman. And so, basically in Postman, you've got files and folders. But they're not called files and folders. They're called collections is your folder, and requests are kind of like your files. So, these collections, like I'm going to start by creating a new collection. I'm going to create a blank collection, and you get to name your collection. What did we name this thing? We called this dog walker app Tail Runner. Tail Runner. Tail Runner, and then now that we've got this folder, we can add a request, and this request is going to be our post. And so Tail Runner, what do we got? http://localhost. Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm in the wrong box. This box, http://localhost:3000. If I just hit that, I get back hello world, but I don't really want to save. What you do is you wind up saving these requests. Notice this dot up here, this orange dot?
Yeah.
It means it's not saved. So I don't want to save this request. It's not really a useful request, but maybe like my API/dog owners/list. Okay, that's useful. And so I'm going to hit Control S, but I don't want to call it new request. I'm going to call it list all dog owners. And notice now it says list all dog owners. I can close it and bring it back up and send it, and there we go. So it's nice to save your request because now I can close that. And I can have another new request. So I'm going to add a request. I'm going to call this request get dog owner by ID. And here it's very similar to this, but instead of list, it's /1, and that sends that back. So remember, yesterday I called, the way I think of Postman, I called it a browser on steroids. And so we're just able to do everything that we can do in the browser without mocking up a whole interface. We could just use Postman to kind of work with our back end, right? With our routes. And that's cool. So now we've got our third one, which is our post. So I'm going to create another request. And I'm going to call this add dog owner. And this one's going to take some work. But the first thing is that now this is a post, right? If I go back to my code, right, this is a post request. This is not a get request. So you change this drop down, and we're now doing a post request. http://localhost:3000 API dog owners/add. Okay, so I think I've got that route right. But keep in mind, what we're doing is we're pretending like this is our front end, and we need to send information over. Remember, we're sending information over in the HTML body. We're not sending information over in params or the headers. So we actually need to click on this body right here. Does everyone see the body on your screen? So click on that body, and then we're mimicking like this is coming from a form, URL encoded, right? That seems very similar to the code that we wrote over here, this URL encoded. Like we're getting, again, so this is kind of like, sending the data how we're expecting to receive it. And now we've got a key and a value. Key and a value, well, what were our keys and values?
Last name, first name.
Last name and first name. So let's just say first name.
But didn't we have an ID?
And an ID.
And we had an ID. So let's, well, if we do have an ID, but we probably shouldn't let the user specify that.
Can we do like
So we can just add one
ID,
to the.
ID.link?
Yeah. So we're going to say Bob Evans is our first name and our last name. Okay, and I'm just going to click send and see what happens. And so I'm sending request, and it's spinning. If I go back to my code here, okay, good. Well, I got a console table. So we're actually getting something, but notice I didn't send a response back to the client. That's why it's spinning, right? Notice here response dot status. So for now, I'm just going to add res dot status to send the dog owner back, right? Now on a successful request, sometimes it's not considered best practice to send the information back to the client. You might just say dog owner successfully added. Nonetheless, let's do this again. And eventually this spinning errored out because I never sent a response back to the client. But now I get this, right? So all I did was I sent some information to my back end. My back end received that information and sent it back to my front end. But notice the status code of 200. This little green status. That's nice. That Postman just displays that. What other properties did we have? We had like a dogs.
Yeah,
We had a dogs array, and I tend to forget how to send this over. So I'm gonna do this. Dog 1 and dog 2. I'm just guessing, so I'm guessing this is gonna be wrong. Aha. Nope. That seemed to work. I literally just hard-coded an array in, and now Bob Evans has a dog named 1 and a dog named 2. Okay. Single quotes versus double quotes. Single quotes was actually better.
Wait, that's
Maybe?
just a string that happens that bracket, right? There's quotes around.
Yeah, let me see what happens. Let's see what happens if I get rid of the single quotes. Yeah, that's a string. You're right. So that's not what I want. And I've done this before, but I tend to forget how to send that over. 1 second.
Do you think?
So the fix to it, in Postman at least, was to use the same key, just with different strings. So if I said dogs with 1 and dogs with 2, now I've got a key of dogs with an array of 2 strings, which is essentially what we were looking for. Okay, so now we're using Postman to add a new dog owner, but we really haven't coded it all the way, and we did this yesterday. We don't need a console table anymore. I was just using that for troubleshooting. But we can push dog owners.push dog owner. And you might only do this if, okay, we could check for this condition. If there's not a dog owner first name or a dog owner last name or a dog owner with dogs, then we're going to res status. Now let's talk about the difference between 400 and 404. And I'll put this on curly braces so you guys can see this. So if you don't give me a first name, a last name, and a dog, I'm going to send back a error code of 400. 400 just means generic client-side error. Okay, 404 means not found. 400 just means, the client gave me an error. The client gave me an error. And so if I kind of go back here and I uncheck like my last name, now it says, please provide first name, last name, and at least one dog. But if I give them all the information, then I get a status code of 200, right? Uncheck 1, I get 400 bad requests. Okay? Just to point out this scary red text, cannot set headers after they are sent to the client. Typically when that happens, because this is done in an asynchronous world, and it basically, the cause of it is it's trying to send back 2 responses to the client. Like, I know this is in an if, but it's basically, there's a condition where there's no else block here, right? So maybe if basically the solution here, I'm going to hit one or the other. If I wrap that in an else, essentially there's a potential condition where this is true, and then it would still try and run that block of code as well. So as I see that, I just want to point that out. If you get this error message, cannot set headers after they are sent to the client, that's basically you're sending 2 responses back to the client. And you should only send 1 response back to the client. The way that I fix it is by wrapping the response in a big if-else block. You're either going to send that back or you're going to send that back. There's no condition you can send both back. Okay? And that's more or less what was causing that. So now, remember here it says, okay, here I'm sending the dog owner back. I don't want to do that. I don't want to send the dog owner back. Again, that's not the best practice to just send information back to the client. Instead, I'll just say maybe something like that. Yeah, sure. Dog owner. I don't even know that I want to send any information. I'll just say dog owner successfully added. Just give them a successful status code and a little message that says dog owner successfully added. And by the way, every time I restart my server, this is just an array. This array is stored in RAM. When I reboot my server, RAM is kind of flushed out clean. Okay, so pretty soon, not before too long, we're going to learn some databases and how to save this information in a database, make it more real world. But for right now, we don't have that. If I go to list all my dog owners, I can send that, and I got 2. And if I add Bob Evans, now it says dog owner added. If I go back to list, okay, I could see Bob Evans on there without an ID. And Matt said, hey, we know how to add the ID, so maybe we just do that. Before we push the dog owner, let's set the dog owner ID equal to the length of the array plus 1. Right, so just adding 1 to it, pretty simple fix there. Incrementing by 1. Right, so now if I restart, again, rebooted the server, so we got 2 dog owners. We add the 3rd one, and if we list them, okay, the ID is at the bottom. Nonetheless, the data is there.
I figured out how to get on this prompt. If you just put the ID key at the top of the request request.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
It'll add at the top.
Yeah, and so, thank you for that. And so the thing is, well, what if I want ID at the top? You could mark it as the first key here and just leave it blank, and that would work. I would just say I'm not even worried about it because JavaScript is flexible. It's a loose language. You're going to get your data structures kind of having different orders of their properties, and I'm okay with that. Yes.
It's not really working for me.
No problem. All right. Another thing to note here is what we're really doing on line 22 is a little bit of data validation on the back end. So you guys learned data validation in like HTML. That's front end validation. You also have data validation at the application tier. In the middle tier or the back end, you could say either way. You can also have data validation in the database itself. So there's really 3 layers you can have data validation, and the best practice is to have it in all 3 places. We are going to learn at least one package that is specifically used for data validation. Okay, so all of this manual JavaScript that we can write here, and we can write all sorts of JavaScript to validate our data. You know, when it comes to what we're really going to use, this is a very manual process, and there's just a more efficient kind of way. So yeah, we can write this manual checking for all these properties and checking to see if anything is falsy. But again, there's a little more efficient way. Okay, so what else do we want to do? We can get all the dogs. We can get a dog by its ID. We can add a dog. Oh, by the way, just check this out. If we go to list all dogs, we got this ID of 3, and now I should be able to get the dog by its ID and return Bob Evans, the new dog that was added. So let's see if I add the same dog owner again. It does look like it successfully works, and let's see if I send the list all dogs. Now I've got this dog on there twice, or this dog owner on there twice, with 2 different IDs. So let's check. If yours isn't doing that, that's fine. We'll troubleshoot. So we've got read, we've got create, read. The hardest one is update. And so let's go ahead and do a put. Now check out the path. We're going to update /ID. So the first thing to do is read the ID so we know what const dog owner. Okay, let's talk about this line. Get the dog owner from a find method where the dog owner ID. This is very similar to what we had up before, right? I don't know that I'm going to stick with this line of code. This was just auto-generated. What method can be used here with arrays? I'm going to show array dot so splice, I always array slice. Okay, slices, you could see we're going to be using slice to remove an element. So if we slice 2, it removes camel. Or excuse me, it removes, it removes the first ones. Okay. Here, this is the syntax where we're removing okay. One second. Okay, I've written this method a bunch of ways in the past, and the way I'm going to write it today, and may need a little bit of troubleshooting. Let's start by finding the owner by its ID. Okay, remember rec.params is that route variable that we defined on line 31. If that dog owner doesn't exist, let them know that that dog owner isn't found. Create a new object, a new JavaScript object, by spreading the dog owner that you found and merging it. This essentially merges the rec.body, all of the properties in the rec.body. So you might just have a first name, you might just have a last name, you might just update the dogs. Okay, so this line essentially merges the two objects. The dog owner that's currently in the array with the rec.body. Whatever the object is sent across in rec.body, this is going to merge the two. Then we use the array and get the index of the, so dog owners is the array, get the index of the dog owner. So this will be, you know, whatever the index is, index 0, index 1, that's your position in the array. So index of will return the number. So this will be, you know, again, sub 0, sub 1, sub 2, and put the updated dog owner in there. And then you just return, you know, I'm not going to return the data. I'm going to return a dog owner successfully updated. And this is where I'm going to start. So now there's two things you have to pass. You have to pass an ID in the route, and you have to pass an object in the rec.body using Postman. And so we'll start to test this out. And so if you're still typing, give me a minute to test, and I'll come right back. Okay, so I'm going to add a new request here. Add request. Update dog owner. By the way, did I make a mistake? No, it's a put. So we're doing a put request, which is an update, which is good. So back into here, let's change this to a put request. http://local host 3000 API dog owners. What do we call it? Update slash update slash 1. Okay, so that's that route variable, but we also have to pass an object in the body. So I'm going to click on body, form encoded. I'm going to change my first name to Dylan. Whoever my first dog owner is, let's see if we're updating its first name. That says successfully updated. If I go to dog owner by ID, pass in number 1, okay, it did update Dylan. Let's change last name to Dylan. We got double. Okay, now if I go back to get dog owner by ID, okay, first name and last name are both Dylan. This might be more tricky, right? Because if I add a dog named Dylan, let's see what happens here. I didn't really code for this. Let's get dog owner by ID. Yeah, that did a replace. So we really don't want to do that. We don't really want to replace that, right? So that doesn't work here. That doesn't work for that case. So let's start. updated dog owner equals rec.body dot. All right, check this out. I can very manually do this. Updated dog owner dot first name now I'll say if if there are dogs in the rec.body and dog owner has dogs, I'll explain this.
I see what's happening. I was still trying to make the last step work. I see what's happening.
Instead of spreading like I was doing before, where I was just merging the two objects, I'm going property by property. Taking the updated dog owner's first name equal to rec.body.first name. Now, do you want to do this every time? No. You only want to do this if rec body first name, then you do the update. If rec body last name, then you do the update. If there are dogs coming across the rec.body and the dog owner has dogs, then you spread the array to be a combination of both. Then you update the original array with the updated dog owner. Okay, now this is the next code to test. Again, update's always the hardest. So here comes the test. Again, I'm just going to send first name over. Let me make sure I'm booted up. So I'm booted up. I'm going to update. Oh, I had a null object. So let's just do an empty object instead of null. Dog owner is an empty object instead of null. Okay, so we just updated our dog owner of 1. If I go to get dog owner, and we lost their ID, so let's not lose their ID. Let's start by doing that. Updated owner ID equals dog owner.id. Okay, reboot. Update dog 1. Get dog owner by ID. Good, we got Dylan, but we lost here. Why don't we just start updated dog owner equals, we'll start with spreading dog owner. And we don't need to do that. That should work better. So let's list all dogs. Owners, John Doe. Let's update dog owner 1. There we go. That way we didn't lose the information. Let's put in a last name. Beautiful. Now let's add a Dylan to the dogs. All of that to say, hopefully, haha.
Oh my.
It's timing out for me.
Let me fix that real quick. I'll be right with you guys. So let's dogs. We just need to push. That's all we really need to do. This doesn't need to spread. So we would say now we're just going to push. Let's try this one more time. Okay, so data's reset. Almost. So to troubleshoot this, I'm just going to do a console table, and I'm going to spit out the rec.body.dogs. Rec body dogs. And that should just put Dylan. And so I might need to for each over this. If there are multiple. But that just does a push. I go back to that. There we go. Now Dylan's on there. And if I want to add another one, that's where the for each would come into play. So there's Dylan and Dylan 2, and that might actually work out of the box. No, I got a for each over it because it's a array. You have to for each over it. So for each rec body dogs for each, take this line and push the dog. So this is an array of dogs. Probably we got Dylan and Dylan 2. Let's restart. We've got our 2 dogs. Here we're adding Dylan and Dylan 2. And now we're adding Dylan and Dylan 2 to the array. Okay, thank you for your patience. I'm going to help everyone out, get everyone caught up. What I did here was a very manual update process where I read the current dog owner by its ID. If it doesn't exist, I send an error. I start a new object equal to the current dog owner, right? So here's our updated dog owner. I probably would call this current dog owner and versus the updated dog owner. And then I say, hey, if there's a first name that's sent across from Postman, then update the first name from Postman. If there's a last name, update the last name from Postman. This console table was just there for troubleshooting. I could take that out now. Then I said, well, if there's anything inside of your dog's array from Postman and the dog owner already has dogs, which I should probably check that out, because if the dogs are empty, maybe I could, that might still be okay. But nonetheless, then let's loop over the dogs sent from Postman. Again, rec.body is sent from Postman. And for each dog, push that dog onto the array. Then update the array with the updated dog owner, send back success message. Yeah, the question is, should we really wrap all of this in an else statement? And maybe that avoids that error down the line of not having multiple headers sent back. And that's fine. To do that, you know, I would just kind of block off this right here. There's my if, and then this is my else. Whoops. And kind of put this curly brace right here. And then maybe tab all this over, make it a little bit more readable. This if statement right here. Try and get these tabbed over correctly. Something like this. This also belongs in the else, which it does. Yep. All right, so I was thinking of the splice and slice, and boy, do I get those confused. And what I've used in the past to remove an element out of an array is splice. And it's you know, notice this one, the splice takes 3 arguments. But I like the 2 argument one. This is the starting index. And how many do you want to delete? So if I know I want to delete, you know, the first element, which is index 0, I would put 0, 1. And that can be used to delete the first element. And so if you find out, if you look up an element and you get this index of, we kind of use this index of, right? If you look up the dog owner, get the index of the dog owner, and then you can splice that index. Is what I'd like to do. And this is going to be done with a router.delete. You can see the path is /id. There's another curly. Let's see what this does. So this gets the dog owner, and there is exactly what I said. It listened to me. We're splicing the index of the dog owner, and we're deleting one element. And so look up the dog owner by its ID. If it's not there, let the user know it's not found. Otherwise, splice the array using the index of the dog owner and remove one and send dog owner successfully deleted. And missing a parenthesis right here. Bless you. And that will allow me to boot up my app. And so if I just kind of list all my dog owners, 1 and 2, if I add a dog owner, and go back to list, okay, 1, 2, 3. Let's add a new request for delete. You could do it up here too. This is a delete request. API dog owners / delete /3. So right now, if I go to list all dog owners, I've got an ID of 3. Now if I go to delete it, it does say deleted. And if I go back to my list, I'm down to 2. If I delete 1, it says dog owner deleted. And if I list that, now I'm just down to my ID of 2. If I delete 2, if I delete 21, we get the dog owner with a given ID was not found. But if I just delete 2, dog owner deleted, list all my dog owners, empty array. I thank you guys for following along and doing your best to follow along. I tend to go fast But I think you guys kept up, so thank you for that. So this was CRUD operations in Express with arrays. And I'm going to stop the recording here, help anyone troubleshoot any code. Keep in mind, I will push this to GitHub, so you can clone my repo, and I'll make that available on Discord as well as on the YouTube video, because I'll repost this on YouTube, and you guys can watch it. It took us 4 hours in person, but an hour and 45 minutes minus all the breaks. So it'll be a little bit faster on YouTube.